I thought I don't think I sweated, but I just felt horrible. And I
Could
had-
we have everyone sit down, please? Please take a seat so we can get started. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Diana Walsh. I'm co-president of the League of Women Voters of Collier County, and we are the organizer of this forum. There are a number of co-sponsoring organizations for this forum and for a series of forums for elections in Collier County in 2018. Our co-sponsors are Collier Citizens Council, Greater Naples Chamber of Commerce, Greater Naples Leadership, Collier County President's Council, Greater Naples Better Government Committee, and the Naples Press Club. You'll see a list of our sponsors and the upcoming forums in the programs that are being handed out tonight. And you can also find those on our website, lwvcolliercounty.org. We're delighted to welcome you all to this candidate forum for City Council for the election on February 6th. We thank you for your interest and attendance here, and we welcome those who are watching at home as well. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that neither supports nor opposes any candidate or political party. Our mission is to encourage active and informed participation in government. We thank each of these candidates tonight for their willingness to represent the residents of Naples, and we're looking forward to a civil exchange from the candidates and the audience. I have a couple housekeeping items. One, the obligatory, please check your cell phones and make sure they're turned off. Thank you. And also, for questions from the audience tonight, we have league members here with note cards. They'll hand them to you with pens. You can write down your questions, and we will review them for redundancy and appropriateness and so on. And then when you've written them out, just wave your hand up like this and someone will come along and pick them up from you. I'd like to introduce to you now our moderator for this event, League member Bonnie Michaels.
Thank you very much. The four candidates seated before you are running for 3 seats on the City Council. There's one incumbent running. They are seated alphabetically from your left. Terry Hutchison, Mitchell Norgart, Linda Penniman, and Gary Price. The candidates have been informed that they have 2 minutes for an opening statement of biographical information and to let us know about the goals and the reasons for running. Then we'll have rounds of questions, and they will begin with the same questions directed to every candidate, unless there is a specific question for one candidate. You have 1 minute to respond. You can request to allow 30 seconds to counter an opponent. The questions have been gathered by the organizing and supporting organization and members of the audience, and we will review them for appropriateness and redundancy. I'd like to introduce Cynthia Cromwell and Colleen Brady. They are our timekeepers. We will strictly monitor the times for your responses. Please watch the yellow light indicating 15 seconds left and the red light indicating stop. For 30 seconds, you'll just get a beep. All right, we'll begin with, we have 2 minutes each for the opening statements, and we'll start with you, Mr. Hutchison.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this event. I also want to thank city staff for the work in putting this together as well. And, you know, over the past several weeks, these 3 other candidates that we've been going to various forums, and I want to thank them for putting themselves out there and willing to serve the community and go through the process that we've gone through. My name's Terry Hutchison, of course. I have a family. We live in Lake Park. I'm a president of the Lake Park Neighborhood Association, and I serve on the President's Council as president of Lake Park. I have a business here in town. I'm the kind of guy that started from the ground up, one of those people that started on the graveyard shift years ago, just doing what had to be done at a convenience store. And I was successful and moved up. I now have the 7-Elevens over on 3rd Street South and the Exxon Mobil at Central and 41. Proud to tell you that in Hurricane Irma, we were the last to close and one of the first to open to make sure that this community had the services that they needed. I'm not a politician. I didn't come up through the career path that the typical folks that would serve on city council, the typical boards and commissions. I have a great deal of respect for those that followed that path, and we have several on this dais today that took that path. But how did I serve the community? You see a little bit of a bio in this handout. Health, housing, and education. That's where I've spent my time and efforts and money. So take a look at me. I encourage you to go to my website, take a look at my profile, see what I'm really about. Thank you.
Mr. Norgart.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for inviting me here. My name's Mitch Norgart. I've been in this community, lived here and raised my family for 40 years, 40. And about 25 years ago, I learned that I was drawn to community service. I love this community and I want to give back to it, and I continue to wish to do that on City Council. My leadership roles have been with Gulf Coast Runners as the president for 10 years and on the board for 25 years. I've been on the board of the Naples Philharmonic League for 10 years, which is now called Artist Friends. And I'm also on the design review board here at the city. I sit where Gary is sitting right now. I do that once a month, and we review projects that come before the city so that we can determine whether or not they qualify with building codes and zoning ordinances. If they don't comply, then we reject them. I'm very much in favor of adhering to building codes and to the zoning laws as it relates to how this city should be maintained and sustained. Professionally, I'm a real estate broker. I've been a real estate professional for 28 years. I've had some ups and downs, as you may have read, but those downs have now been fully recovered, even though my family and I suffered greatly during the worst recession since the Great Depression. We've recovered. We've taken care of everything that we were responsible for. I've taken care of everything that I've been responsible for, and that has taught me how to be financially responsible, and it will transcend into City Council as well. I will say that my platform is something that you can read on mitchnorgart.com, but sustainability is my key word for our lifestyle and for our beaches, for our water, for everything else. And I will also say that I was the only person who was at the Women's March.
Ms. Penniman.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the League for staging this yet again. This is a tremendous public service, and I'm delighted to see the number of people that are here tonight. I've been coming here since 1976 when my sister moved here. I remember Fifth Avenue when actually there was plywood on a lot of the windows down there. It was kind of a sad situation. We bought our house in 1996. I got embroiled in a zoning issue at that particular time, which launched me into the Moorings Property Owners Association. I served about 6 years on there, and part of that time as their president. I also am deeply interested in our beaches. So I took the initiative of applying for the Coastal Advisory Committee in the county. I've been serving on that particular committee for 6 years. I finished one gentleman's term on the Planning Advisory Board and spent 2.5 years on the city's Planning Advisory Board. My position on council also puts me on the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is the advisory board to FDOT, having to do with all kinds of transportation, all kinds of modalities, including roads and bridges. My focus in the next 4 years has, in my opinion, needs to be on our budget. As Mr. Price will oftentimes say, we don't have a money problem, we have a spending problem. We've spent too much on fluff and not enough on necessities, and I think we need to, the first thing we need to do is to sit and prioritize exactly where our money needs to be spent going forward. We have huge infrastructure needs that need to be addressed, and none of them is going to be inexpensive. We've got some big expenses.
Mr. Price.
Thank you. Pardon me. Thank you, and thanks to the League of Women Voters. Thank you all for being here. I also wanted to reflect on thanking the candidates for their willingness to put themselves out for our community. I think we're all better when we get volunteer public servants, and it's a good thing. My name is Gary Price. I've lived in Naples since 1999 with my wife, Kim. We raised our 2 children, who are now 22 and 20, here in Naples in the same house. I started my business about 10 years ago in Naples, and we have a lot to repay this great, wonderful community because it's done a lot for our family. I've been able to serve in many capacities in the city, and I wanted to share a funny story. The reason I started in public service was somebody told me that there was a spot on the Planning Advisory Board, and they encouraged me to apply, and I couldn't quite figure out why until I found out they didn't have any applicants. And so I got on the Planning Advisory Board because I was the only applicant. Sometimes showing up is half the battle. From that humble beginning, I'm still humbled by what I've learned sitting up here for 16 years in some capacity. I still have a passion for this wonderful city. I think I've learned a lot. There are a lot of things yet to be protected and preserved in this community. My platform is proven, principled, and proud to serve, and it includes content related to the redevelopment of our wonderful city, as we have that happening at a pretty expansive pace. The fiscal responsibility, which is critical to our success, and I can show through, hopefully through the Q&A tonight, that's been something I've stood for. And finally, bringing back public input in a town hall type format and getting the public involved in their government instead of counting on people to come into this chamber, which isn't always the easiest thing with all of our busy schedules. So my promotion would be to go out to the public and go out to the residents, and the timer looks like it's not working, so I'm going to stop. Okay?
Uh-oh.
I saw her shuffling, and I'm sorry for the people over here that I can't see.
We lost the
because of
beep.
band. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Price.
Thank you.
All right. We'll start with the questions. Now, remember, 1 minute, and we'll start with Mr. Norgart. What will you do to increase affordable housing in the city of Naples?
Well, I'm so glad you asked me that question. I've met with Stephen Ruby, who's the chairman for the Affordable Housing Commission within the county, and that's one of my platform positions, is that we all know that the value of land in the city of Naples is extremely high and somewhat cost prohibitive for multifamily affordable housing. However, the city can work much closer with the county to ask large landowners to contribute their land so that developers can build affordable housing that actually makes sense for those who instead of driving from Lehigh Acres or from 100 miles round trip. I will work very closely with the county and with the county commissioners, and I've already made inroads into that in order to get that done.
Thank you very much. Ms. Penniman?
Yeah, I have a theory that maybe one of the best ways to approach this particular subject matter is if government is willing to donate land, particularly vacant land. When you look at the metrics of that, if it's vacant, they're not getting money off of it, right? There's no ad valorem taxes, so for heaven's sake, let's put some affordable housing on that vacant land. Now you've got ad valorem taxes coming back. Those ad valorem taxes eventually, depending upon what the project is, eventually will probably pay for the cost of the land that it is assessed for. So I'm looking at city property that is available. Actually, I've identified a piece. I've got a team that is working with me on this particular initiative, and I hope to roll something out sometime within the next month or so as a possibility for affordable housing in the city of Naples.
Thank you very much. Mr. Price?
I think it's a problem we have to look at and own as what I refer to as one Naples. We're one community, whether you're talking about the county or the city. We are one community, and we have a problem to solve so that we can have the support necessary for the services that we require. What I will tell you is that I challenge all of us to think about whether or not that's government dollars to solve that problem or private dollars. I think at the end of the day, these are taxpayer dollars we're talking about potentially, and I tend to get a little stingy when it comes to spending taxpayer dollars on projects, and so I would prefer for us to look at private solutions. Government seems to be really quick to solve problems with other people's money, and I would suggest that we start with the private solution.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchison.
Well, the one thing I'm not going to do is, as a member of your city council, is not force housing into areas where it really isn't a good fit. The reason we're even having this discussion is because government hasn't properly planned for this issue. So what are we going to do about it? The land here is very expensive. It's okay for the workforce to drive into our city to their jobs. Major cities all over the country do the same. So we do have a problem. We need to have it solved. It's going to take cooperation with the county. I like Linda's idea and would work with her as a proponent of finding city property. But folks, this is another issue where people haven't adequately looked at the problem and prepared for it.
Thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Penniman, we're going to start with you this time. A citizens group has proposed an amendment to the charter for a 5-member volunteer ethics board and Office of Ethics and Government. This is to investigate the complaints concerning local officials. Do you support this amendment?
I do, and part of the reason that I support this particular amendment is that the state process is way too lengthy. And to have a complainant make a complaint against someone and then to have the process take a year or more is not a fair or kind process, in my opinion. So I think I proposed a City Ethics Commission to council that did not fly, but the purpose, in my opinion, and the hope would be we'd never need to convene this particular body. But if we need to, it would be a much fairer process if it were local. So I very much support a local process. I think it's important to have.
Thank you. Mr. Price.
I've been public with my endorsement of the process of raising the bar in ethics in the city of Naples with respect to ethics. And so I'm in favor of continuing conversations with our community about how we become more ethical and hold especially elected representatives to a higher standard. I am concerned about the commission that's being created and their oversight, who oversees that commission, and the answer I've received is the courts. If that's the answer, then I think we need to have a more public, thorough discussion about if that's really something that we want. But in terms of raising the bar, in terms of ethics, we always need to be challenging ourselves to hold ourselves to a higher standard. Always been a fan of that, and look forward to further discussions about the actual amendment itself. That's a ongoing conversation.
Okay. Mr. Hutchison.
The city of Naples, now and 4 years into the future and beyond, is going to come under a great deal of pressure from those that want to come into our town and realize the highest return on investment that they can possibly make. Your elected officials are going to be tempted in a lot of different ways. We all know that looking around the country, there's corruption in government. We need strong ethics policies, and I fully support what the Ethics Commission is attempting here. I would tell you that if you vote for me, I'm the type of candidate that will make the decisions that are the right thing to do for our community. I was the only candidate that came before the City Council and opposed this city garage at 4th and 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchison. Mr. Norgart.
Yes, I support the Ethics Naples endeavor. I do have questions that, in fact, I spoke to George Dondonville tonight, who's with us, which is the national committee. The questions that I have are, just as Gary said, how is the Ethics Naples committee held accountable? What is the next level for them? And that's my question that I have. The answer I don't think I've gotten completely clearly, even though George is very eloquent. I also want to know where the money is going to come from that will pay this committee. So by and large and fundamentally, absolutely I support it, but I still have some questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Price, I'm going to start with you.
All right.
Why should the voters of the city of Naples trust you to make decisions about managing the city's finances and taxpayer dollars?
Thank you for that question. I think maybe the most critical question voters have to answer at the end of the day is, what is it about my character, and in this case, my character, my background, and my experience to be a good steward of your money? And I will tell you that not only in my private life do I manage a several number of families, all of their wealth, and help them manage their families in multiple generations. That's what I do for a living. I'm not a professional politician either. But my public service also reflects one of being a good steward of the taxpayer dollars, whether it's through pension reform, which we did several years ago to the tune of $160 million over 30 years, where we asked employees to pay more into their own pension, or just questioning the budget every day on where every dollar is going and being accountable. Ultimately, I'm responsible as one of the council members for your dollars, and I take that very seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hutchison.
Well, it's a good question, and one that the public really needs to think about. This is not playtime. This is the real deal. We're managing budget of close to $150 million. I come from a background in the corporate world where just in this part of the state, I managed thousands of employees, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenues and assets, and I did it in such a way that I was recognized with one of the highest awards that the company had to give. So I know what I'm doing. I can ask and get answers to the serious questions that we have as city government. I've been endorsed by Doug Finley, and we're losing a great city councilor in Doug Finley, folks, and I strongly suggest that we get somebody that Doug Finley really endorses on this council. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Norgart.
My wife and I have managed and raised 6 kids and sent them all to college. That's my personal aspect of financial management. I went through a very difficult time during the recession, and during my recovery, I learned an enormous amount of financial responsibility through professionals, and that experience alone will allow me to manage your money with your priorities in mind. I've also been charged with responsibility of running 3 boards, not running necessarily, but president of GCR, first vice president of Naples Philharmonic League, and second vice president, where I was in charge of development, raising money for the youth music education programs. So every bit of my experience in leadership and in business has been, and with my family, has been managing money. I can manage yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Penniman.
You know, make no doubt about this. We are, any of us that are lucky enough to serve on council are managing your money. That's a tremendous burden. So it's important for us to manage that money well. You worked hard for it. We're now managing it. You're paying our bills. So let's make sure that that money is managed well. I did call for an audit of the CRA. I had some concerns about how the money was being spent there. That did not fly with council, but I feel as a result of that I have called for transparency in government practically the entire time I've been on council. And I'd like to see all of us continue to have that kind of transparency.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll start with you now, Mr. Hutchison. What could the city do to improve infrastructure? And we're talking about including maintenance of storm drains and storm ditches.
Well, the list is long. It's the forums that we've been in front of, is all these candidates that we've been in front of. We've heard of so many issues, and of course we know about some of the issues, the flooding that's going on, and we have spent, you know, this 7-Eleven up here at Central and 41, we spent $3 to $4 million there, and we still have significant flooding at that intersection. So the the infrastructure, in my opinion, is one of the areas we've got to focus on first. Before we start spending our money on the little shiny baubles, the things that we would like to have, we've got to take care of the things that are most important to this city. It's not any different than what you do with your own finances and the things that your own family desire. We have to make those same kind of decisions and have the will to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Norgart.
I think our infrastructure is improving daily. We are working with Streets and Stormwaters Division. Greg Strakalus and Andy Holland are two very, very competent engineers who are working on our $20 million stormwater system that's going to be taking effect here pretty soon. We've got a lot of work to do, but if you look around Naples, our infrastructure is good. It can get better. Our connectivity can get better for the health, safety, and welfare of all of our citizens. We need more pedestrian-friendly streets. We need more bicycle-friendly areas that the motorists and the bicycles don't fight and they don't compete. And as far as the lane diet for US 41, I'm currently not for it because I don't want to put bicyclists in harm's way on US 41. But I'm anxious to work with Greg Strakalus and Andy Holland and the rest of the engineering staff of the city.
Okay, thank you. Ms.
Mr.
Penniman.
Hutchison is absolutely right. The stormwater system in this city is truly vast. Part of that system are 30 retention ponds, 26 of which perk. If they ain't perking, they ain't working. And in order to have this system work, we have to have those working. Every time we dredge a retention pond, it's over $1 million. We've got $25 million, in my opinion, to start. We do have a stormwater master plan that was called for that is coming before us in February. We'll take a look at that. My hope is that it is very, very comprehensive because we cannot Band-Aid this stormwater management system any longer.
Okay, Mr. Price.
I wish I had if it's not perking, it's not working. I'll come up with something by the time it's over. I like that one.
Trust him on that.
It's a challenge. A lot of the things that I learned sitting up here is that you've got limited resources and pretty extensive rebuilding of infrastructure. It's pretty humbling to look at where we were 10 or 12 years ago with respect to stormwater, especially in Old Naples along Broad, and also with respect to our water, potable water. So let me just touch on where we were, and that was we were using potable water exclusively to water our lawns, and we were faced with having to build a $60 million desalination plant. And we chose to do ASR wells many years ago and invested in that. Current council's done a fantastic job of continuing. I'm looking forward to reviewing these next plans and being good stewards of your money.
Okay. Ready for the next question. Mr. Norgart, we'll start with you. The City of Naples pension fund is approximately $44 million underfunded, and the fund's trustees are expected to urge the council to consider increasing annual payments to bring down the deficit. This will probably happen after the elections. What are your thoughts about the underfunding, and how should it be addressed?
A gentleman at the Maureen's Property Owners Association asked the question last week that he asked 4 years ago, and nothing had been done yet about that. And while I'm not blaming anyone about that, he is recommending that we convert the pension fund into a 401k program for the employees. That is something that I would strive to achieve simply because that's what so many other municipalities are going towards and have been going towards for many, many years. So that's how I would try to reduce the budget or the deficit by encouraging us to go to the 401k program.
Okay, Ms. Penniman.
Yeah, those of us who have if you've got a nickel in the stock market, you know that it's doing very well right now. I do think that our investors have probably made some headway insofar as our indebtedness on our pension plans. But as we all know, those that are managing our money, or if you manage your own money, the salient thing here is when to start to retreat before we lose whatever we may have gained by not retreating soon enough. We definitely need to increase our share insofar as payments to our pension plans are concerned. We have one whereby the interest payments, we're not even making the interest payments that meet the unfunded deficit on one of our plans. So it needs a comprehensive look.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Price?
I served as the chairman of the pension board for 8 years, and I think that the progress we made was significant. The funded ratios were well under what they are today, and I'm not happy with $45 million of unfunded liability. I've asked for the last couple years of council, and I hope that I'll be able in a position to sit up here to ask council to consider $500,000 a year to go towards the unfunded liability. We have one of the top performing pension funds in the state of Florida. We have an amazing pension board, and it's going to take, it's a 30-year time horizon. So when you look at the returns, we have to look at the structure, whether it's defined benefit or we go to a 401k, we have to have that conversation. We've had it before, we have to have it again. What you'll find with me is that I'm not afraid to have those complicated conversations and wrestle with those issues. It's your money again, as we've all said, the theme is, and we have to be good stewards of it. Pension liabilities will ruin cities in Florida in the next 20 years.
Thank you.
We're not going to be one of them.
Okay, Mr. Hutchinson.
So it's another red flag, isn't it? We talked about $44 million unfunded. We've talked about, not here tonight yet, but we've talked about here in this city, budget overruns on a fire department. We're spending money on parks that if we have these problems, again, where are we spending our money? You're going to need leadership up here and somebody with the will and the desire and the knowledge base to take the city in the right direction. When it comes to the pension fund, folks, it's not okay for us to sit here and be talking about $44 million unfunded. Now, there may be reasons for us not to fully fund it, but we need to close that gap significantly, and it takes a solid plan to get there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Penniman. Should Naples begin to incorporate sea level rise adaptation into building codes? And should this apply to remodeled homes as well?
I think if we don't start to look at this, we're not being realistic. For this reason, you know, it wasn't just Irma, it was Harvey, it was Sandy. We are getting odd, strange weather. Sea level rise is only going to add to our woes in Florida because we are low. So it's the difficulty is paying for something like Irma with a little bit of sea level rise or a surge is immensely expensive. So paying for that up front could help to reduce the expenses you have afterwards.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Price.
I think the question was, should City Council consider looking at changing codes to accommodate sea level rise or something to that effect? What I think we should do as a council is we should be having meaningful conversations about all these critical issues. Whether we change the codes to adopt to another level or standard above what the state provides is a different conversation. I think at the end of the day, what you all as voters are looking for is you're trying to hire 3 people that can have a reasonable conversation, maybe with differing opinions, and build a consensus around topics such as this that aren't necessarily just political, but they're meaningful conversations that we have to have, that we should be able to get rid of the politics and have an adult conversation about how it affects our future. And that's what I think of all the things I've done, that's my strength, is being able to work in a group and find some common ground and take the city to another level. As it relates to this, it's the beginning of a conversation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hutchinson.
So Irma's been mentioned. The code has been mentioned. I would tell you that before Irma hit, our reserves rested somewhere around $3.5 million. The cleanup after Irma, post-Irma, is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $16 million. So we're talking about some of the code changes that need to happen. Yes, I think that Naples, especially Naples, we have the people here that can lead the way and chart a new course, come up with what's right for our city on codes for changing environmental conditions. I want to go back to the money situation, though. what should our reserves be? Should our reserves now be $5 million, or should it mirror what it took to clean up after a storm that wasn't near as bad as it should have been?
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Norgart?
You're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Sea level rise is coming, and I've got 2 kids right there who I want to ensure have a home here in Naples in 30 and 40 years from now. So my answer to you would be yes. We need to prepare for the rise of sea level, and if that means, as Mr. Price said, starting the discussion now and having a time frame by which we have a conclusion on how we address building codes is something that we need to set a time frame for. As far as remodeled homes, not quickly, but for building codes, sooner. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, Mr. Price.
Yes, ma'am.
A new Naples Fire Station is currently $3 million over budget. Several proposals have been made as to how to fund the overage. How do you believe the overage should be funded?
Well, we're going to have to take a look at the overall budget. It's not going to come from one source. I can tell you, I'm not a fan of extending any debt at this time, and I think we have budgeted too much in some of the other programs. We're going to have to take it from other places. I've never been a fan of the $10 million fire station, and I've gone on record of voting as such in the past, but dealing with what we have to deal currently, we have to provide a safe place. We have a vacant lot that needs to be turned into something, and we're going to have to turn the budget over. It's not going to come from raising taxes, I'll tell you that, and we're going to have to find out how we can do it without raising our debt.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hutchinson?
Well, first of all, I'm sad that we've put some of the city's finest in this position where we're talking about being over budget. These guys, these men and women that serve us, they certainly deserve the best. And I'm just saddened that we're even having this conversation, folks. $3 million is a significant amount of money when we scrape a building down and we don't have a contract in hand on what it's going to cost. How does that really happen? I know a little bit about the background, but I'm not happy with it. We do have to address the money situation. Gary's right. You'll never get a vote out of me to raise taxes to pay for this problem, this issue. But we're going to have to find it somewhere, and this comes with infrastructure. It's right into that same conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Norgart?
Could you ask the question again, please?
Certainly. A new Naples Fire Station is currently $3 million over budget. Several proposals have been made as to how to fund the overage. How do you believe the overage should be funded?
Well, if you talk to Fire Chief Pete DeMaria, he is concerned, as anyone is, about how we can fund it, and he's the man who's building that fire station now. And it's one that's going to be the emergency command center as well. So it's got some implements or some aspects of construction that have gone way beyond what just a typical firehouse would be. So my answer would be, we'll find a way to fund it without raising taxes, and we need it. So the council will find a way to keep from having to assess anyone in this room or anyone in this city. We'll find a way to build it because we need it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Penniman?
For me, it's a simple answer. Baker Park. Baker Park is not necessary to our park system. Our level of service in our park system is quite high. That, to me, that's Mr. Hutchison's description, that sparkly little thing out there that really doesn't need to happen. Let the future users of the park pay for it. Let donors pay for it. You're going to get people, there are going to be people who will contribute to that park if you'll just open it up and let it happen. So my answer is very simply Baker Park.
Okay. I have some questions now from the audience, and we'll start with you, Mr. Hutchinson. What can the city do to clean up Naples Bay?
Just today, I met with some folks out at the Botanical Gardens. So FGCU has an extension office there, and these folks have done a wonderful job over at Freedom Park. And they've put in an ecosystem that filters water effectively and does it in such a way that it really, as far as I know, it hasn't cost the taxpayers much, if anything at all. The reason I was there, folks, is specifically about this issue. We have a problem in Naples Bay. 70% of the mangroves are dead, 80% of the oyster beds, 90% of the seagrass. And this is coming from the runoff from Golden Gate Canal. I think I may have found the right people to tackle the problem, and I'll be bringing this before the council when the time's right.
Great, thank you. Mr. Norgart.
Well, we all know that the city of Naples Bay is dirty, it's polluted, and it comes from the runoff, not just from the Golden Gate Canal, but also from the lawns and the fertilizers and the weed killers. And even though we have gotten a lot more strict with what you can put on your lawn and what time of the year you can put those chemicals on your lawn, we have to start levying more fines. And we've got a great code enforcement officer in Roger Jacobson, and he can have his staff out there more and making sure that the lawn people aren't putting on chemicals on the lawns that shouldn't be going on there. As far as the runoff from Golden Gate Canal, there are ways to clean and filter that water before it gets to Naples Bay. But it is a concerted effort. The stormwater plan is a good one, and that will help clean up Naples Bay.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Penniman?
Yeah, the Gordon River Master Plan needs to be implemented. I think they've toyed around with that long enough. They need to launch that thing. Unfortunately, we've just weakened our fertilizer ordinance. We had what was considered to be by the state, a state model for a fertilizer ordinance. Unfortunately, we just weakened it. Very sad day for Naples, Florida. But the point is, we fertilize too much and we water too much. The Water Management District has just suggested to us that every 10 days is plenty. How many of us are watering sometimes twice a day? And not all of us are on reclaimed. So we're using potable water to water our lawns, so we're watering too much and we're fertilizing too much. It isn't necessary.
Thank you. Mr. Price?
I came up with a saying, Linda, finally. Wait, what isn't measured doesn't get done, or something you said. We all say it, but one of the things that I think is really critical about this conversation is it's very difficult, and we've been answering this question. It's always been a part of everyone's campaign slogans, is to clean up Naples Bay. And honestly, we put a pipe in north of the gateway of taking water out of the Golden Gate Canal, and we're putting it down in the ground, but it doesn't have any effect. I mean, very little effect on the health of the bay. It has some effect. It's a good start. We can support the federal and state efforts to redirect some of the stormwater, some of the runoff that's coming in the Golden Gate Canal. That's already underway. That's already been funded. The Army Corps is doing that and building that project. Sometimes we don't have to own every project, but I agree with Linda, where I'm kind of saddened by the fertilizer. I'd like to revisit that, if I may, if I'm so fortunate to be part of council again, because we spent a lot of time holding our standard up and measuring so that things were better for the city of Naples.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, we'll start with Mr. Norgart this time. Who's going to pay for the Naples Ethics Committee? Is it an outside funded group, or will taxpayers have to pay?
I don't know, and I'd like to know. I really would. I don't have a clue right now. I don't think that the city of Naples should pay for it. I don't think the taxpayers should pay for it. I see the value of having this board, but my feeling is that it's self-funded, and that we have contributions, or we have some way of paying for it that is not something that the taxpayers or the city of Naples has to pay for.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Penniman?
The typical model for a commission is usually a retired judge, oftentimes a retired police officer or someone in law enforcement, almost always someone from the university system, and then it can be someone like a retired council person or someone like this, all of whom serve without pay. So there's no cost there, really. The only cost that there could be would be perhaps a staff person that takes in complaints and then processes them to the commission in order for them to do their investigation and further deliberations. But there shouldn't be, I wouldn't think, a tremendous cost involved. I spoke with a retired judge, a university person, and an ex-officer. They were all willing to serve with no pay.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Price?
As I understand it, this would be approved by the city council. The budget of this organization, commission, would be approved by the city council, meaning, as I understand it, it's taxpayer dollars funding this. So if you want to get a straight answer, at least as far as I'm concerned, I think as I understand it, it's taxpayers funding this commission. And I think that if we have any questions about whether this is something we want to do, we make it a town hall public discussion. I think it's early on. I commend them for their efforts, and I think it's unclear, some of these pieces and components. I'm glad there are volunteers that are going to be willing to serve, but clearly it's taxpayer dollars that are going to fund the budget because it's approved by the city council.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hutchison?
I understand the question, but I also want to point out an opportunity. The reason that we're having a discussion about an ethics, independent ethics commission, is because we have some weaknesses, some apparent weaknesses in our own ethics policy. So when you solve problems, you should go to the root cause of the problem in the first place. If we have a weak policy, that policy needs to be looked at, and we need to examine ourselves as council members, and do we have the will to strengthen it to the point that we protect our community? If we don't have the will to get it done, then we bring in the independent commission. If we bring in the independent commission, then we need to make sure that they're independent and they have the flexibility and the independence to make the decisions that are good for this community. So I really like Linda's idea with people serving. They will use our facilities. There will be just a little bit of expense, but folks, it's a serious issue.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Price, a question just for you.
All right,
Okay.
I love those.
Will your participation in Fifth Avenue Partners cause a conflict of interest with City of Naples Council issues? What will you do to minimize or reduce those conflicts?
Great question. I think in 16 years I've had maybe 2 issues that were a conflict. We serve 10 families in our company, and it says Fifth Avenue Advisors, but we're actually up on 41. We just started on Fifth Avenue. I never have a problem. We serve such a small group of people, and they're not invested in the city of Naples other than having a private residence. And so if there is ever an issue, I'll let it be known, recuse myself, and let the conversation go on. It's very simple for me. This whole ethical standard thing is, I think, very important, but for me it's very simple. You make good decisions, you respect the people that you're working for, and when you have a conflict, you call it out and you deal with it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Penniman, we're going to talk about Hurricane Irma. It was a wake-up call for all of our city and Collier County. How are we going to address sea level rise and storm surge? What would you do to better prepare our community to address all these issues, storms and sea level rise?
Yeah, and you actually asked the question earlier about codes and adaptation relative to sea level rise and surge. And yes, we absolutely have to take a look at that for exactly the reasons that I indicated before. Irma was costly. If we start to do adaptation planning for surge and sea level rise, the costs as a result of those errant events will be reduced because we will have planned for them. So I think that's the answer, that we need to take a good look at our codes and decide what we can do to help reduce the financial impact, not only on the individual homeowner, but on the city insofar as these errant storms are concerned.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Price?
Oh, is that for everyone?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes,
Oh, I
everyone.
thought that was just for Linda.
Sorry.
I was just enjoying her answer. I don't have, actually, I don't, let me just say, I don't have a lot more to add. I think it's a critical issue. Let me just use a little bit of my time to tell you that one of the things I figured out when I was sitting up here is the amount of time that we spend talking, and this is not directed at Linda, by the way, or Ms. Penniman. This is not directed at you, but what I figured out is that government spends a lot of time talking, and I figured out that it was $5,000 an hour that we were spending of your money and when we're in session. And so I tried to shorten up, and our meetings actually did shorten up a little bit. When you start thinking about it at $5,000 an hour, where they could actually be doing other work, no disrespect to council, but I have a lot of respect for our staff. And so now I've just used a whole minute to talk to you about efficiency.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hutchinson.
This is one of those issues that we can really get in front of. We know that storm season's going to come again and again and again. So we've talked about several issues here tonight where we didn't adequately, as a government, the government hasn't protected our interest enough. And this is one of those situations, folks, that we don't have to just beat it to death with talking, but we can put a serious plan together, whether that's continue to soft armor the beaches and pay to put sand, or do we hard armor it? Is it time to go to a different level of armoring the beaches and being able to deal with the weather events that will come, right? It is going to come. So we need to have the kind of discussions that get us to the point where we can effectively manage these storm events.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Norgart.
The city of Naples has a very comprehensive plan in place right now that is moving from south to north along the city of Naples for stormwater and for storms coming to Naples. When you compare the city of Naples to, for instance, one of the keys like Marathon or any of the keys in the Middle Keys that were just absolutely wiped out, we did really well because of our building codes with the new structures and with the enforcement codes that we have in place. We get 60 inches of rain in about 4 months of the year. And our streets and stormwaters have done a pretty darn good job of managing that water when 2 and 3 and 4 inches of rain fall in less than an hour. People get upset, but we are doing a pretty darn good job with it. We do need to be proactive and make sure that we're prepared for the next storm.
Okay. Mr. Price, back to you now. This is for everybody.
All right.
What is your plan to alleviate parking issues in downtown Naples?
Thank you for that question. And I'll just apologize for my throat lozenge. I've been blessed with the bronchitis on top of everything else, so I'm fighting on the best I can here. Parking, I know, I didn't mean to be dramatic. I wanted to apologize for the throat lozenge. We have a lot of vacant parking lots around the city that we're not using. And I've been trying unsuccessfully to get us to look at ways to use that as a resource for parking instead of building a public facility with public dollars, which are your dollars. So my first plan is to go out and seek to find agreements where we can with existing churches and other places that have parking that we can either shuttle and alleviate some of the parking demands. And the other thing is to get the staff members for the businesses on Fifth Avenue to stop parking on the street, get them off the street, and leave it open to our visitors and our residents.
Okay. Mr. Hutchinson?
That's where I was going to go. First, you got to look at the staff, the people that are staffing the businesses down on Fifth Avenue, and let's try to come up with an alternative for their vehicles, right? Open up that space. I believe that parking is and will be an issue that we're going to have to deal with for many years to come. I think some solutions are already coming forth. The CRA money that has addressed Fifth Avenue in the past, we've hit a home run with Fifth Avenue, folks. I think it's apparent that Fifth Avenue has done just spectacularly. I'd now like to see those funds, the CRA funds, focus on that 700 acres between 41 and Goodlet Frank. Let's look at some parking solutions there. And by the way, we've got crosswalks. We can get people from there over to Fifth Avenue. Let's use some of the resources we have effectively and solve some of the problems.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Norgart.
In my preparation for City Council, I've reached out to several landowners in the radius of Naples within about half of a mile. One of them is Dr. Alan Weiss, the CEO of NCH. He would be amenable to leasing us space on the weekends at his parking structure if we have a shuttle system that takes people from 4th Avenue North to 5th Avenue South on 8th Street. That's one area that we can think outside of the box. And we have access, as Gary said, to churches and other business and property owners that we haven't explored yet. But this is an issue that since the 4th and 4th garage is now off the table, we have to go full force into finding parking solutions, and I promise you I'll work on it.
Okay, Ms. Penniman.
Well, quite frankly, an exasperation for the fact that the BID refused to sort of take control of the fact that they needed to get their employees off of Fifth Avenue. I did approach a church, thought maybe I had something going until they lawyered it up, and that kind of killed that deal. But anyway, so get the employees off of Fifth Avenue is the first answer. The second thing is we've studied parking to death. We know from several studies, both that the bid is done and the city is done, that yes, we do have a parking problem during the season between January and the middle of February, and usually when we have events. The Community Services Advisory Board for the city is looking at the number of events that we are having downtown and hopefully are going to reduce those. That'll help tremendously.
Okay, thank you. All right, back to you, Mr. Hutchison, and this is for everybody. How can we best protect the city's potable water supply? Is the supply adequate? What conservation measures, if any, would you support?
So our city has built a water plant that currently has a capacity of about 30 million gallons. We're using 14 to 15 million gallons. In 20 years, we're going to be at about 17 million gallons. We talk about the brown water, that reclaimed water that we're using. Once that program kicked in, folks, it reduced our potable water usage by over 28%. So that was a winner. The gallons per day per person dropped dramatically. So one other little fact that you might find interesting, 50% of the water that we produce using our city utilities is purchased outside of our incorporated area. So we're in a pretty good shape when it comes to the capacity and ability of our water department to serve the public.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Norgart.
I think we're doing a very good job of protecting our potable water supply at this point in time. If you go talk to Bob Middleton at Utilities, he will give you an excellent dissertation on what the city has implemented and what they continue to plan for, and the fact that we have a surplus of water right now that we are selling and providing county residents. And so I would be a proponent of more ASR wells, and those are working to preserve water runoff that otherwise would be going into the bay. We can only take about 10% of that water that we put into there, but at the same time, ASR wells are something that we didn't have several years ago. So the potable water system is in great shape. My daughter just hooked up her house to the Reclaim Water program, and it's working great. She's no longer watering her lawn with potable water.
Great. Thank you.
No question that Naples was very forward-thinking in our putting in a reclaim system. We now have 4 ASR wells. Thank God we've got the Gordon River right there to help us when we might need a little boost insofar as promoting that the reclaimed. I do think that it really should be citywide. Right now we basically have it throughout the collector streets. It needs to be citywide, and I think it needs to be mandatory that everyone has a reclaim system hooked up. Little expense involved with that. I'm sure the city would be willing to look at perhaps helping to people that maybe can't afford the hookup, which is about $2,500, to afford that. We do that frequently.
Thank you. Mr. Price.
It'd be great to have everyone on the reclaimed water. I was part of council that decided to stick their neck out and dig the ASR wells and start the whole program. It wasn't my idea, but I supported it. So I was part of council that. That's the other thing. It doesn't always have to be your idea to support good things that happen in the city and know when there are good things going on. Let me tell you that my sense is whenever I felt like things were going well and we're okay, that's when my spidey senses would go up and say, wait a minute, that we're not challenging ourselves. And my spidey senses are going up for this, that I'm not okay with it just we're doing well. I want to challenge us to be very efficient, to get this extended beyond where it is now, and not just, we have great staff that are doing a great job, but I think we can push a little further on, like, it's a capacity issue. It's not a, we have enough people that want it. We just need to find the supply of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is for everybody again. Mr. Norgart, we'll start with you. What will you do to improve traffic flow across the Gordon River bridges on US 41? Traffic during season backs up often.
Well, I think most people logically would ask that we allow people to turn left at the four corners and continue to go left onto 41 or 9th Street. That is something that I know has been contentious, but it's one way to alleviate, because right now your only access to downtown is to take a left on 10th at that stoplight. So opening up the four corners is my first layer of contending with the traffic problem. As far as any other areas, we have to look at the east-west thoroughfares along 41 between 7th Avenue North and 5th Avenue South. Again, we have talked about a bridge, a pedestrian bridge, and we've also talked about opening up some of that area so that we can get more east-west traffic.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Penniman?
So I actually learned from a gentleman sitting in the audience tonight that years ago there was a sign at, I believe it was Golden Gate, that basically said, business district straight ahead, everybody else turn left onto Golden Gate. If you don't want to go there, turn left here. So I think we ought to get a little bit creative with this and see if maybe we can't encourage some people to start turning left, maybe at Pine Ridge, maybe at Golden Gate, if they have absolutely no interest in coming into the downtown area. We know from the mobility study that about 28% of the people that arrive at Four Corners are just meandering. They're just meandering. They have absolutely no destination. If we could spin off that 28%, that would help us tremendously.
Okay, thank you.
I guess they caught me that day meandering. That was me. I'm one of the 28. I've always been shocked. The last time we did a study, it was about 80% going through Four Corners was going someplace other than what destination was downtown, and 20% was meandering. So the meandering rate has gone up in this town, and I'm not going to stand for it. Sorry, we've done this a lot. So let me tell you, it's a critical problem. We can divert traffic where possible. We can also look at the density and intensity of redevelopment in downtown Naples. We don't always have to just take all of these programs and these petitions and just take them and go from 2 acres to 30. You wonder why it's so busy? It's because we have more people coming here, and we do have a say on how we look in 10 years, and that's part of what I stand for, is protecting that character, and it's through making good decisions on a redevelopment.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hutchison.
We've got a lot of traffic over that Gordon River Bridge over there. It's 70,000 cars a day right there at that bridge. So it's a significant issue. What I'd like to see, and I've been in that line before, whether it's the line going straight to downtown or the line turning right on Goodlet Frank. And to be honest with you, I've noticed that the people that are turning right to go on Goodlet Frank, the stoplight is stopping them when there's no reason that they should be stopped. So why don't, again, let's look at the root cause, and let's start solving the root cause and finding a good, convenient way to let that traffic flow. And maybe the pedestrians that cross that street right there, we work to really more effectively put them down through the tunnel. That tunnel isn't used near as much as what it should be.
Thank you. All right. This is for everyone, and we'll start with you, Ms. Penniman. Would you support a ballot translated in Creole French?
Well, I need to know a little bit more. Are you talking about strictly for the city or for the county, or I need a little definition here? I'm going to guess that we don't have that many Haitians living in the city. So if we're just talking about a city election, I'm not sure that it's totally necessary. However, what's the harm? If you're going to do Creole, you might as well do Spanish. So, it doesn't cost anything. Why not?
Okay. Mr. Price?
Look to see what it takes to get it done. Why wouldn't we want to include everyone in voting in the city? And since this is a city election and there's nobody else involved, I think we ought to look at it.
Okay. Mr. Hutchison?
This is one of those issues where the pendulum can swing way too far the other way. So I'd consider it. I'd have to look at what the data and the facts say that is compelling enough for us to make these changes. But folks, we don't have to accommodate every segment of society in these kind of initiatives. If we can, and we can do it without costing the taxpayers additional money, then so be it. I'd support something like that. But I want to make sure that that we stay on target and stay on course here. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Norgart?
Well, the fact that someone asked that question makes me believe that it's of grave concern and that there are people in this city. What I'm questioning is that a ballot that pertains to just the city, to the county? So if it's to the city, I think we need some more facts as to why that is requested, and if it's a rampant request, then absolutely. We put Spanish on the ballot a long time ago, so if we need to put Creole on the ballot in order for people to know what they're reading, then by all means, I'm for it.
Okay. Mr. Price and everyone, the next question is, how do you think we should handle the development of the Naples Beach Club golf course density? Could the city purchase the golf course?
So that's a great question. It's a huge part of our history, and I think it's a huge part of our future. And oftentimes when I'm sitting up here, I'll say, you only get one chance at this. You get one chance to get this right. So you better get it right. We better get it right. And through the process, whether that's a public process, I don't know who the buyers are going to be, what they're going to want to build. But I will tell you that if the process is right and you keep everyone informed and involved and you get feedback, that process matters. And we have already, the Beach Club already has zoning underlying the property. So the golf course is residential and the hotel side is more dense residential condominiums. If there's any changes to that, that needs to be a public discussion. And that's where we make critical decisions that will change our future for the better and preserve our character. That's exactly the kind of decision that you should put me in office to do.
Okay. All right. Mr. Hutchinson?
On that same question?
Yes, you haven't answered that, have you?
No, I think probably a couple other candidates need to answer that as well. So if you go into the treasurer reports that each candidate has to file, you're going to notice a big gap in mine. I'm not funded by developers, okay? I've got just regular old citizens, folks that want to see this community take the right direction. That's who's funding me. There is a land development code under this property that this question is referencing. I believe that whoever buys the property needs to buy it with an understanding of what that code is, and they need to abide by that code. And that's the way it should be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Norgart?
The Naples Beach Hotel should be a park or a golf course in perpetuity as far as I'm concerned. My real estate broker hat tells me that I'm not sure that that's the highest and best use of that land, but having been a resident here for 40 years, I would much rather see that golf course stay where it is and donate it, have the Watkins family donate it to the city maintains it, the city provides a certain number of golf plays for the hotel guest, for whoever buys that hotel, if it gets purchased. Right now there is no contract on the table whatsoever. Four Seasons is not out there, Marriott is not out there. I would like to see them donate the land to the city and we maintain it. And I don't think it's going to be an enormous expense for us to do that, especially if we give a certain number of plays to the hotel and we then open it up to the public.
Thank you. Ms.
Well,
Penniman?
I promised myself I'd find out how much it costs on an annual basis to run an 18-hole golf course. I can tell you that certainly golf course memberships ought to tell you something. If golf course memberships are running in the six figures, I would imagine it'd be rather expensive for us to run a golf course. So I'd like for us not to do that, maybe lease it out to somebody for a year. It's a very creative idea, the concept of our buying that and keeping it as green space. I think that's green space that would be absolutely exquisite to continue to be there. The impact of 350 home sites on this city in that particular location would be so horrendous that it's inconceivable to even think about it. So, very creative idea of purchasing it.
Okay. We'll start with you, Mr. Hutchison. This is for everyone. Beach management is a major item for the board to consider annually. One of the most successful solutions in other areas has been construction of artificial offshore reefs to reduce storm surge and send, I'm not sure send what. Why haven't we considered this? I think it's storm surge and sand.
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Sorry.
No.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Is that the question? That's it?
Yeah.
So it is a good question. It's a forward-thinking question, and I think it's compelling, or it's asking your city council to look at that as a solution for some of the problems that we know or we've realized with past storms and storms to come. I would have no problem taking a look at the facts around that and making sure that we make the right decisions that's good for our beach. Our beach, folks, is, in my opinion, it's our greatest asset. If you look at Naples, and if we didn't have that beach, you might as well call us Avon Park or Sebring, right? So taking care of one of our greatest assets is a serious issue, and I believe it takes consideration of these projects such as what's being described in this question. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Norgart.
It's not one of the two top ways of maintaining the beach and renourishing it. Currently, hydraulic dredging is the best way to renourish the beach. It's also probably one of the most expensive. As far as building reefs that would suppress the wave action, I would have to research that more before I sit before this group of people and tell them that I know what the heck I'm talking about. I will tell you that the truck haul and the hydraulic dredging are the way to go, and that's currently the way we should be looking at renourishing our beach on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you.
Well, as we all know, we do have an artificial reef out there, and we are trying a brand new iteration just south of Indies West, whereby we are building a breakwater with a groin going into there in the hopes that that will accrete sand that we lose during the winter time. So this breakwater concept really is a new concept, and I frankly hope that it's going to be immensely successful, because if it is, then it is an iteration that we could do going forward. The biggest difficulty, quite frankly, is in getting these things permitted. The Army Corps is oftentimes reluctant. It's easier to work with the DEP than it is with the Army Corps. I'm hoping that this demonstration project will pay off.
Thank you.
I was asked by Mr. Donahue many years ago to come out to look at his beach, and he built T-groins, which is what Ms. Penniman was referring to. He went through the federal process and through the Army Corps and got approval south of Gordon Pass to build them on he paid for them, but they work. And we don't have to wonder if they work, because you can go down and you can see it. It's working. So let's stop hauling sand to the beach hydraulically or truck. Let's at least pause and have a conversation about what would a T-groin do for our beaches, and is there a way to preserve the sand so we don't have to continue to put millions of dollars back into the beach. And what I called, we sat right down here once with the county commission and the council, and we talked about it, and I called it insane beach renourishment. It's doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different outcome. Let's just have some hard conversations and maybe include T-groins, and let's have the public involved in that.
Okay. All right, we're going to have a little fun now. It's going to be short answers, yes and or no. So let's start with you, Mr. Norgart. Should the city of Naples attempt a traffic lane diet, meaning narrowing driving lanes from 6 to 4 lanes and adding a bike path on US 41? Yes or no?
No.
Ms. Penniman?
No. No.
I'm probably going to get every one of these wrong, and I have a 50% chance. No.
And no.
Oh, okay. Okay, Ms. Penniman, we'll start with you. Should the city code limiting building heights to 41 feet be strictly enforced? Yes or no?
It's 42 feet, and yes, it should be.
Yes.
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 Okay. Mr. Price, should Naples license medical marijuana dispensaries?
No.
No.
Mr. Norgart?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Mr. Price, should Fifth Avenue become a pedestrian mall or walking street?
No.
No.
Mr. Hutchison?
No.
Ask the question again, please. I was reeling over my pot question.
Should Naples license medical marijuana dispensaries?
No, I got that one.
Oh,
Yeah.
The Fifth
I'm sorry.
You want to change your answer?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You can.
I got a real tongue lashing
You
at the
can
Women's
challenge.
March for opposing it.
Sorry.
So,
You can-
and I
Okay.
agreed with the woman.
But you're the
ahead.
only person there.
All right,
I
sorry
was the
about
only
that.
candidate there. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate that.
Should Fifth Avenue become a pedestrian mall or walking street?
Mike, I like the idea of maybe exploring doing it on weekends. So I'm going to say yes.
Episodically, yes.
Wait.
Yes.
Yeah.
See? Now we can condition it, Gary. Go ahead.
I'm only kidding. I'm giving her a hard time.
All right, have we all answered this? All right, Mr. Hutchinson, yes or no? In October, the council approved the sale of beer and wine at Laudermilk Park. Would you support the sale of beer and wine at Cambier Park and other city facilities?
The answer is no, and if I had my way, we would take it off the pier as well.
Okay, Mr. Norgart, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay,
No.
No.
okay. We'll start with you, Mr. Norgart. Should the city examine its building codes to be made more compatible with solar power?
Yes.
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 Okay. Ms. Penniman, starting with you, yes or no? Should native plants be required for medians and other city properties?
Yes.
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 Okay. Mr. Price, Naples Council recently voted to weaken its fertilizer ordinance, which is one of the best in the state. Would you support a return to the original ordinance?
Yes.
Yes, and I want to correct my
No,
former...
just yes or no.
No? Okay, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, you already did it. Mr. Hutchinson, yes or no? Many low-lying areas within the city experience repeated flooding. Should building permits be denied in those areas?
No.
Mr. Norgart?
No.
Mr. Penniman?
No.
No.
Okay,
Sorry, I went too soon.
all right. Okay, well, we're down to the last phase of wrapping up. We give you a chance now to have a closing statement, 1 minute. So we'll start with you, Mr. Norgart.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you and for you all to get to know me and make your decisions based upon what we've all talked about. The 40 years that I've lived here is not as important as what I've done to contribute to the community. And what I have learned in my leadership roles and in my experience on boards of directors and the wisdom that I've gained with being in leadership positions will give me, and I think of the city council as a board of directors. And there are several people in this room whom I've served on the boards of directors with for many, many years. And I think they will agree with me that an incredible amount of experience comes from that. I also have children that live in Naples, and that is the biggest reason why I'm running for city council. So I would appreciate your vote so that I can ensure their future and your kids and your grandkids' future. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Penniman?
Yes, my hat's off to the League of Women Voters. You've done a beautiful job. You handled this very well, as you always do. I am seeking a second term on council. Much has been done. There is much left to do. We've spoken about a lot of these tonight. We talked about the budget. We talked about the pension plans. We talked about our stormwater management plan. We talked about traffic. All of these things have to be addressed. But let me tell you, one of the great things about what we've been able to do the past month or so is that what we're finding is that you all are turning out more so than ever. We can't do this alone. We're not that smart. We really need you out there feeding us all the time as to what you think is best about this city so that we can pass the legislation to support that. So please continue to show up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Price?
Thank you to the league. Thank you all for being here tonight. We are better when the public's involved. We're better as a community, and I will attest to that. I've been really proud and actually more humbled to serve this city, and I want to continue to do that. It's a passion that I have. And what I finally realized is that I want to help make it the kind of place that my daughter, who's now 20 years old, will want to come back and get a job and raise her family. And that's my standard. And it's for all of our kids and for our grandkids. And I think that's a day-to-day, everyday, full-time passion that you have for this city, that I have for this city, to make sure that we make the best decisions we can for our future. And I look forward to that if you'll give me that opportunity. I would appreciate your vote on February 6th, and please vote on February 6th.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchinson?
Again, thank you to the League of Women Voters. I want to thank the public that's out there tonight who's dialed in. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about this election and this process and these candidates. I want you to learn more about me. You're not going to hear it all tonight, but go to hutchisonnaples.com and learn more about me. Learn why your vote's so important, and learn why I'm the right candidate for one of these positions. And as we're talking about it, there's 4 of these candidates running for 3 seats. I want you to vote for the top 2, your favorite 2, folks, and make sure you give me your 3rd vote. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn this over now to our co-president of the league, Charlotte. Is it Charlotte? Oh, it's going to be Diana.
That's right, Diana Walsh. In closing, I want to remind you again that the election's on February 6th. To vote in the Naples City Council elections, you must be a City of Naples registered voter. You may vote in your assigned polling place on election day. There's no early voting, but vote by mail ballots must be submitted by January 31st. We have a representative from the Supervisor of Elections office with us tonight over here in the back, and I thank him for being here. He is here to answer any questions you might have about registration or about elections in the future. If you're watching at home, you can find information on their website, colliervotes.com. For this forum is going to be available on the city website, naplesgov.com, in their archives, and it's also going to be on the League of Women Voters website, lwvcolliercounty.org. You can also find on our website candidate profiles provided by the candidates, yes, as well. 2 other things I wanted to mention. We have copies of our newsletter in the back, and you're welcome to take those. Please do. Secondly, we also have the Ethics Naples. If you would like to have that as a question on the ballot, people are collecting signatures so that the public can decide whether it's going to be, whether they like that or not, that idea. So you can sign a petition if you wish. We want to thank Mayor Bill Barnett, City Manager Bill Moss, and the city staff for the use of this facility, and to David Freilich for his assistance with broadcasting the forum. Thank you to all our volunteers tonight, our timers, and our moderator, and especially thank you, candidates, for participating tonight to this very interesting event, and thank you for watching. Good night.
Thank you.